and welcome again to Oak Grove Media and Film. In today's video, we are going to be focused on a Paper 2 film from the WJEC and EduCAS Film Studies GCSE, and that film is The Babadook. The Babadook is one of the global English language films that come up on Paper 2, and the specialist area for The Babadook is narrative, and that is what we are going to touch upon in today's video. So narrative refers to how a story is told. So story, if we want to know what the difference is, story are the events that happen, but narrative is to do with how those events are sequenced in the film, so how they are structured. It can also refer to the perspective as well. So from what perspective are we being told the story? Is it from a specific character's point of view, or is it a more omniscient perspective that we are seeing these events from? So with my classes, I teach a very standard form of narrative structure, which is very common in mainstream films, and that is the 3-act structure. So this is sometimes referred to as the classic Hollywood structure, simply for the reason that it is so commonly used in Hollywood films, but not just Hollywood films. You will find that a number of mainstream films will rely on this structure because it's a great way to tell a story in a linear fashion, and it's something that audiences have grown accustomed to, through the decades. So the 3-act structure, as the name suggests, divides the film's narrative into 3 distinct parts. So I'll briefly go over what each of those acts are. So we have Act 1, which is referred to as the setup, and this is the first quarter of the film, and we will be introduced to our main characters and the equilibrium of the situation that our main characters find themselves in and the world in which they inhabit. Act 2 refers to the middle 2 quarters of the film, and this is sometimes referred to as the build or the confrontation. But in this part of the film, we will get our sort of rising action, and we will eventually reach a crisis point by the end of that act, and then that leads you into Act 3, which is your resolution. So that's the last quarter of the film. Each of the acts have their own unique plot points, which help to basically drive the narrative forward and through to its eventual conclusion or resolution. However, if you'd like some more information, some more detailed information about the 3-act structure and the plot points that are contained within, I highly recommend that you have a look at this video, which I have previously done on the 3-act structure, and then perhaps you can come back here and watch the rest of this Babadook video a bit more informed, hopefully. The Babadook fits extremely well into the 3-act structure. It's very clear that the 3-act structure has been used when you start to look more closely at the ordering of events. So let's have a quick look at how the Babadook fits into this structure. Okay, in Act 1, we are introduced to Amelia's character and Samuel's character as well. And we are introduced to the fact that their equilibrium is not particularly pleasant. We've got behavioural problems from Samuel, but we also have Amelia really struggling to deal with the grief of losing her husband, and also to cope with her son's challenging behaviour. Act 1 culminates in the inciting incident, and the inciting incident in this film, which we're going to have a look at a little bit later in closer detail, is the reading of the book. So the arrival of the book into the house and then reading the story of the book that propels us into Act 2. So Act 2 starts with rising action, and in the Babadook, this takes the form of the knock at the door that we get, and obviously signalling that the Babadook has entered the home. We also get a decline in Samuel's behaviour, so he becomes more challenging for his mother. And then we get as well the book returning after Amelia had tried to get rid of it. So we get this intensity starting to drive us, up towards the midpoint twist of Act 2. So the midpoint twist comes in the form of Amelia's possession. This is the thing that is going to change the rest of the course of the film. Her possession now turns her into the antagonist character, and Samuel has to then sort of respond and battle for his, his mother's soul or spirit, and tries to get through to her after that point. So to finish off Act 2, we get the stakes being raised and it leading us up to a crisis point. So this happens when Amelia initially kills the dog, which is raising the stakes, because we are now potentially sort of thinking that if she's killed the dog, because that was something that was in the book, is she going to harm her son? And the crisis point comes when she chases Samuel through the house. She verbally abuses him to the point that he wets himself, and we, the audience, really do fear for his safety and her sanity as well. So the Act 3 climax in the film, this sort of takes place after Samuel has managed to get through to his mother and the Babadook has been expelled from her body. But the climax moment is when Amelia has to face the Babadook in the bedroom, and we have this sort of showdown between these two characters. And she basically takes back control, and in this climactic moment she banishes the Babadook, so it is not allowed to stay in the house, or at least not under its own rules. It must abide by what she tells it to do, and so it is banished to the basement of the house. And then we get our falling action, which is establishing that Samuel and Amelia's relationship is much improved, and there is this sort of normality that perhaps has never actually been present, but we get a much more loving bond between the two characters. And just as a side note, you might notice that the colour palette changes at the end of the film as well, and we have a much sort of more brighter outlook on the future there. Okay, now that we've identified the distinct acts and then their various plot points, let's have a closer look at a key sequence. So we are going to have a look at the inciting incident, which is the reading of the book, and we're going to explore how Jennifer Kent uses her microelements to communicate to the viewer that this is a significant turning point for the film, but also she communicates ideas about the film's genre, and she establishes or continues to establish a very dark and sinister atmosphere through her microelements. So let's have a little look at reading the book.
You can choose one tonight. Where'd you get this?
Okay, let's pause there. So I wanted to just draw our attention to the design of the book prop, because I think it's significant in indicating through the microelements here the inciting incident of this film. This book is what is going to change everything for Amelia and Samuel in this film. So you might have noticed that up until this point, the film's colour palette has been quite desaturated, so it's mainly consisted of greys, blues and blacks in the house, and this has really created a very washed out and lifeless look that's potentially symbolic of Amelia's mindset, her depression, her grief that she has been really struggling to contend with, and we just get this sense that there is no joy, there is no life in this household. It's just merely an existence. However, this is the first real sort of splash of colour that we get in the film, with the the close up here of the book, but it is a deep dark red, and that really does have connotations of blood, potentially violence as well. I think the shade of the red, I think, is really key to have a think about, just because it really does remind me of something more blood-like than anything else. And in addition to the red, you have got the colour black on the cover with the writing and the the outline of the Babadook. The black here I think connotes something mysterious and definitely something quite sinister as well, just for the usual connotations that we have that come from the colour black.
On the shelf. If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook.
Okay, this is going to happen with the cinematography as the sequence moves on. There are these moments where an extreme close-up is used on the book text, and we get a almost handheld style pan across the page. What this serves to do, I think, is to align us with Amelia and Samuel, because we are seeing the text as they see it, so we only know as much as they know, and in addition to that, because we don't get to read ahead, not that much anyway, as the shots continue, it helps to build a sense of suspense as well, and we could connect that back to it being a key convention of horror, the fact that we don't know what's coming next, we're not sure where this story's going, and that sort of coupled with everything else that goes on in this sequence definitely sort of like creates a little bit of intensity for us the viewers as we try to anticipate how this book is going to end.
If you're a really clever one and you know what it is to see, then you can make friends with a special one, a friend of you and me.
Okay, I'm just going to pause there on the picture of the Babadook, so the obviously the pop out of the Babadook, which we're going to see a little bit more of as the sequence progresses as well. It reveals more of his shape. However, I thought it would be worth noting that the design of the Babadook characters, obviously here is meant to appear like a children's book character. We've got this sort of simplistic language in the book, the pop-up design, all of these things are things we associate with a typical childhood book. I think the only thing that is obviously slightly concerning is that it uses the colour black, and there's no other vibrant colours in there that we would expect to see, so there is something quite sinister. But the actual design of the character is something that is potentially reminiscent of a German character from a children's book, which is called Struwelpeter, which is translated to shock-headed Peter. I'm just going to have a screenshot here of what that character looks like so you can judge for yourself. So this storybook, this German storybook for children, basically is made up of a number of different short stories, and they have morals and lessons that teach children about consequences, and some of them are quite dark as well. Some of the consequences are quite sort of serious, like a lot of typical fairy tales that do tend to have rather sinister overtones to them. So I was thinking that the design of the Babadook, which is reminiscent of that shock-headed Peter character because of the sharp, or the sharp looking fingers, and then the sort of the hair poking out of the hat and the rest of it, it is potentially sort of communicating to audience that there is a similarity. This is a book character that is here to teach us a lesson, or to teach specifically Amelia and Samuel a lesson, albeit a rather sinister one as the film progresses. But it is worth you taking a moment to stop and think about the impact of these design choices. So what are the connotations of the top hat? What about the sort of dark cloak, the sharp fingers, the fact in some of the imagery he has a smile fixed upon his face as well. Think carefully about those decisions and what it might communicate to the audience, and how it might feed into that horror aesthetic, and that there's conventions that we often have with supernatural horror films.
His name is Mr. Babadook, and this is his book. A rumbling sound, then 3 sharp knocks. Babadook, dook.
Listen closely.
That's when you'll know he's around. You'll see him if you look.
And here.
Babadook, dook, dook.
So we get, when the Babadook's name is mentioned, our first use of non-diegetic sound by Jennifer Kent. It's not music per se, but it is non-diegetic sound that comes in when they mention the name Babadook, and it is a sound that's almost insect-like. It sounds like the buzzing of insects, and it's something that comes back many times later in the film when the Babadook is finally in the home, and it's making its way, into Amelia's bedroom. We hear those insect sounds more intensely later on in the film, but here the non-diegetic sound gives us that hint of something almost maybe plague-like, or an infestation, something that doesn't belong, something that, many people in the audience, we do get kind of creeped out by the thought of insects, and just having that little use of non-diegetic sound, it's very subtle initially, but having that in there potentially is foreshadowing the events that are to come, and what the Babadook is. So the fact it is going to infest, it is going to make its way into the home, and it is going to be something that is unpleasant.
We might read another one tonight, eh?
But you said I could choose.
This is what he wears on top. He's funny, don't you think?
That sound is back again.
See him in your room at night?
Mum, does it hurt the boy? Mum, does it live under the bed? Mum? Mummy?
Okay, so we've just seen there the camera movements start to speed up and they become more erratic, so those pans across the page. Here again, withholding some of the text until Amelia has read it, even though she's not reading it out loud, we're kind of almost reading it with her, so continuing to align us with her character, so we're seeing things from her perspective. The speed and the erraticness of the camera movement could potentially indicate Amelia's mindset, this distress and panic, perhaps, but it's also great at causing some intensity for the viewer. That, coupled with, did you hear it, the non-diegetic music that then came in, sort of quite haunting sound that starts to get a little bit more intense and sounds a little bit more unnerving, in addition to the diegetic sound of Samuel asking questions, calling his mum, and it gets louder and louder and louder until we reach this kind of crescendo, and it feels really intense. Again, something we definitely would expect for a horror film, but really showing through the micro elements that this is a turning point in the film, that this book is something that is very sinister, that has potentially sort of bad intentions for the family. The other thing I wanted to just quickly note was the fact that the events that we have just read on the pages of the book are describing things that are going to unfold as the film progresses. So this is a form of exposition, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to link a video by a channel called Studio Binder, which has some excellent videos for film study students on it, but I'm going to link a video that they have done on exposition, and I would really highly recommend that you go and have a watch of that video, and then think about this idea of how exposition is delivered in each of your films, but certainly with the Babadook, as it links to narrative. But the book does serve as a great visual way of offering us exposition as to what the Babadook is, and what it could do, and what its intentions are as well.
Mummy!
How sweetly they sung, telling of the happiness and loveliness that lay at the bottom.
Okay, I just wanted to mention about the use of visual contrast here. So Kent opens the sequence, or near the beginning of the sequence anyway, with Amelia and Samuel tucked up in bed, and she's reading the book. So it's quite a calm scene initially, and then we get this really stark difference with her sat on the bed, and this time Samuel's obviously screaming into her lap as she tries to calm him down. So this is giving us a nice visual indication of the impact of this book. So when we're talking about the book being the inciting incident, we're already seeing the impact that the book has had on, certainly in this case, Samuel's well-being, as he, is terrified and screaming. And for Amelia, it's just another problem that she now has to overcome. So it's potentially foreshadowing what is to come in the film and the trauma that this book and obviously the character within the book is going to bring throughout the rest of the film.
Bottom of the ocean, and entreating the sailors not to be afraid.
So this is a nice little use of a push-in onto the back of Amelia. Let me just pause it there. So it helps to sort of keep that sinister atmosphere going, because it feels like she's being watched because we're behind her, and there's that push in towards her as if something is approaching her. And then listen to the non-diegetic sound as well. I mentioned about the children's book character with the sort of moralistic lessons, but being a little bit dark, a little bit sinister. I feel like there is something inherently creepy about music, box style music. So just have a listen and have a think about how that contributes to the horror atmosphere here. And then as she puts the book away, listen to what happens to the non-diegetic sound. It stops immediately. So the suggestion being there that it is the book that's dangerous, and as she's putting it away, that danger then, at least momentarily, is over. So hopefully that gives you a nice sort of look at this inciting incident, but also pulling in that close analysis of microelements and how it's always working to communicate meaning to the audience, and how we're getting a clear sense of the horror conventions, whilst also giving us those moments of exposition as well, to really set us up for the next stage of the film, which is going to be the rising action. Okay, before we go, I thought it best to mention about the fact that obviously we've only just looked at one sequence for this video. I would obviously strongly encourage you to go away and have a look at some other sequences in the film. For the narrative question, I think it is really worth your time having a look at the character journeys as well. So, for instance, how Amelia starts the film compared to how she ends the film. And you can always look at how microelements help to communicate the development of her character, or even the relationship between Samuel and Amelia at the beginning of the film compared to the end of the film. So use this video hopefully as inspiration for what you should be looking out for in the microelements. Okay, and another thing to mention is the fact that you could also look at the film and its symbolism. So you may have been taught this, you might not have been, but it is certainly something worth considering. Is whilst this is a horror film, it has a supernatural element and a supernatural creature to it, and we can take that quite literally and enjoy it just as a horror film. We could also look at the Babadook as being something that is symbolic of Amelia's grief, or just grief in general, and how grief can come into your life and it can completely consume you, but you have to learn how to challenge it and how to deal with it. So in this film, obviously, it does consume Amelia, and it almost kind of like takes over her entire life, but it's the love of her family member that brings her back out of that grief, and then she's able to stand up to it and she's able to say enough's enough, and she banishes it, but it doesn't go away completely. It lives in the basement and she occasionally visits it, and she feeds it as well. So you might sort of like look at that as being a message about how grief can be lived with and how it will never go away and it will always be there and it will always be part of you, but you can do things to carry on living your life, and just sort of compartmentalizing that grief and having a more sort of healthy relationship with your grief. So that is definitely something that I would suggest that you consider as well. Okay, thank you for listening and watching. If you found the content of the video useful or helpful, please do remember to give us a like and subscribe. And until next time, bye-bye.